welcome to Euranet Plus Press Club debates. The European Commission has come up with a complex package of proposals called Fit for 55, but don't be mistaken. It has nothing to do with your weight or anybody else's weight or with their age. We are talking about climate change and the 55% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030. So far, reactions have been mixed. Some green NGOs are saying that proposals are not ambitious enough. This was, of course, expected, such a reaction. Others are saying that, there might be a big cost of new proposals to a more vulnerable parts of the population and expressing concerns around that. So today we are going to discuss some of the first reactions to this very ambitious and complex set of proposals from different corners of Europe. And with me, I have three great journalists from different European countries. Hette Hassanen from the Finnish news agency STT, Matthias Kolb from the Deutsche Zeitung in Germany, and Florin Orban from Radio Romania. And my name is Artem Skanahas. Let's begin by looking at the biggest European economy, Germany. So Matthias, let's start with you. What was the first reaction from Germany? Was there any reaction now in this summer season? Because of course, Germany is the biggest economy. It will have to do a lot in order to do those CO2 reductions. But on the other hand, the car makers are also very influential. Still, I don't hear too many reactions from them. Have they accepted their fate, or is it the language barrier, or am I missing something?
I think there was quite a nuanced reaction, quite a strong reaction to the Fit for 55 package. I think everybody was expecting it. The business lobbies were expecting it, the activists, the journalists, members of European Parliament. So I think my inbox, similarly to all the other journalists, was flooded with reactions. And I think it depends a little bit on, just like like who you're talking to. I think in general, of course, the car industry, they have been a bit critical. They said it's good, we must do something, but it might be too ambitious. They were critical about saying that it goes too much into the direction of promoting electric vehicles. So they say that it should be more open to technology. But I think when you look at the car industry, it's a huge player, of course, in German economy and European economy. It depends who you talk to. I think Volkswagen is very ambitious. They go pretty much 100% on electric vehicles, so they were very much in favor. But other lobby interest groups who also represent the suppliers, who are, of course, play a big role, they were much more critical because, of course, they have optimized everything that's related to the combustion engine. This is going to end in 2035, that's for sure. So, of course, a lot of remodeling, reshaping, retraining has to be done. And I'm sure we will talk about this a little bit more. Sadly, one day after the presentation of the package, we had this horrible floods in big parts of Germany. So, of course, the debate is right now front and center about climate change, how to prevent these horrible extreme weather events. And since we have an election in a little bit more than 2 months, so it's very exciting and very open how things will go and which party will profit from it.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to touch upon that later, but since you started talking about the election, let's talk about this a little bit now. Some people are saying that Greens might profit from this because they are the party that, of course, that has been telling for a long time that climate change needs to be addressed more seriously and more promptly than it has been so far. But then you also hear Armin Laschet, the candidate for chancellor from the Christian Democrats, also saying the same. But then again, going from words to actions is often the most complex part. And I also hear that there is some criticism in Germany regarding the fact that this is being used for political gains, and how dare you using the human drama and losses in this political campaigning for your own gains. So how do you see that balance of political debate taking shape now?
I think you described it very well. It's a very tricky situation for all politicians, and especially for those who we call Kanzlerkandidaten, those who want to succeed and have a let's say a realistic chance to succeed Angela Merkel, because of course at the same time they have to be present, they have to see with their own eyes what is happening, they have to talk with the citizens, they have to give them comfort and ensure them that there will be enough money to rebuild the houses and infrastructure and all the other things. But then, of course, at the same time, you have to, you don't want to be accused, especially from the Green side, to try to, make profits from what the people are suffering from. So Annalena Baerbock, the Green candidate, she has visited the area, but with almost no journalists following her. So she talked with citizens and mayors, but really kept low profile, which of course is impossible for Armin Laschet. He's the Prime Minister of North Rhine-Westphalia. His region has been hit very hard, and of course Olaf Scholz, the Social Democrat, he uses his position as the Minister of Finance to go there and just like make sure that a lot of money will be made available. I think the Greens will profit in like twofold. I think, of course, when they talk about climate change, that's kind of like their home turf. That's what they're most serious about. That's what I think where they have the most detailed proposals. But at the same time, that's I think in general it's a plus for them. And of course, to going a little bit nitty gritty, the last weeks have not been very good for Annalena Baerbock. We had a lot of discussions about a book that she wrote where there were some parts that were seen as copy pasted. There were some problems with her CV and a lot of debate whether she has the character and the abilities to run Europe's biggest country. And I think now that has stopped. I think now it's really kind of like that horrible tragedy really helped from saying, okay, now we cannot talk about these little things. We have to talk about the real stuff. But of course, and I think that's a good link to Fit for 55. I think the reaction was in a sense that we have talked about the goal of a big reduction until 2030. We had a constitutional court case in Germany which said we have to be more ambitious. Not to burden too much on the younger generation. So I think there was a lot of talking, but there was not so much about doing the actual giving the actual proposals and walk the walk. And I think Fit for 55 and the floods are now like in a good sense to say like, how do you actually want to do it? What are you willing to change, and what sacrifices have the citizens to undertake? And I think this will be something that the debate will center about. So far, Social Democrats and especially Armin Laschet were very much in a sense of just like, climate change is important, but don't worry, nothing will change too much. You can drive your cars, you can go to Mallorca on vacation, everything will be cheap. I think this will be a bit trickier for him to defend, and will be much more interesting to have probably a more mature and more reasonable and reasoned debate among the German public.
Very interesting indeed. We'll be following that, I'm sure, many journalists very closely, also some of the public as well. Hetta, now let's move to Finland in our discussion and talk about the reactions there, because on one hand, you have the Greens in the coalition, and Finland has very ambitious climate goals on the national level, even more ambitious than the ones that the EU has been proposing up until now. But on the other hand, for instance, Finland, together with Sweden, Baltics, and Austria, are in the group of countries that want to continue have more kind of forestry-related economic activities and want to continue to try to, basically cut forest because they believe it can be done in a sustainable way. So how do the two things go together?
Yeah, indeed. We have a government that has very ambitious current climate goals. They are aiming to make Finland climate neutral already 2035, when the EU goal is 2050. So in a sense, the Fit for 55 didn't bring any big challenges to the Finnish goals because the goals were already there. But of course, the question about forests was very heated and passionate discussion before the package came out. And it's not in the package itself, but Commission also gave this forest strategy last week. And what was in the forest strategy like was really big debate, because in the leaked versions, Commission was really maybe stepping a bit on member states' toes, saying some things that are like in the competence of the member states. And for countries like Finland, it's very important that member states get to decide how they use their forest. For example, how you manage your forest, like what is the best way to cut trees, and like should we still use clear cutting or not, and so on. So they didn't want Commission to come and tell what the member states should do in forests. But in general, I think our politicians, our government, they were quite happy with the 54-55, as it like sets the bar in a good level when it comes to the Finnish goals. What there has been like some worries is especially the emission trading system and the shipping, because Finland is far up in the north, and well, we hope that there's going to be more winters with ice on our seas, and that's why the ships needs to be like very well equipped. And when they're well equipped for the winter conditions, they of course use more. Well, they create more emissions because they are. What is the? Sorry, I'm losing my word now. But they're heavier, and like yeah. So. In the emission trading system, the Commission proposal doesn't take that into account, so the winter conditions are not there yet. So that was one big thing that came up on our government comments, that like winter should be factored in. And in general, I think the overall public response was quite happy. Of course, in Finland, we are in the middle of the busiest holiday season, so many people are on their summer cottages enjoying the sun and warm weather, but I think people are mostly interested, as Matthias also mentioned, like how much it's gonna cost for driving a car, or how much it's gonna cost to maybe fly to a holiday destination in the future, and so on. So very like those detailed questions, but good in overall, I would say.
That's very interesting indeed. I want to now move to Florin and to different parts of Europe. What was the reaction in Romania to this package? I've read some of the local experts are saying that Romania and Bulgaria will be the countries that will be affected the most. So far, we've mostly heard about Poland, maybe Czech Republic, but now, you know, you hear it's Romania, Bulgaria all of a sudden. So Florin, is it really so from your perspective? And what was the first impression from you know, nationally about this package?
Well, let's start by saying that Romania officially salutes the Fit for 55 initiative, but in a cold way, I would say, because, well, the social costs. I quote, for example, Romanian Foreign Minister Bogdan Aurescu, who said, "Our actions to ensure the green transition should safeguard the economic competitiveness and take into account the social consequences of this process, which is different from state to state. We need to make sure that these elements are duly taken into account in the forthcoming discussions on the Fit for 55 package." So that's the official position. The opposition, let's go to the Social Democrat opposition. The leader of the Romanian Social Democrat Party delegation from the European Parliament, Dan Nica, said, I quote, "The Fit for 55 package will lead to significant cost increases paid by citizens. We support the fight against climate change, but not at the cost of impoverishing people. The Fit for 55 package proposed by the European Commission will increase energy and fuel bills for all citizens. As the cost of energy is expected to increase, the number of people paying their bills with great difficulty will increase." So that was the quote from an opposition leader. So you see, everybody agrees somehow that the costs will be difficult to bear. And I have the feeling that it's the same case for Bulgaria, because the numbers are more or less similar. The wages level, the pensions, and the problems. And do not forget one thing about those two countries, especially about Romania. The winters are very cold. In Bucharest, it could go to minus 20, 25 degrees. The summers are very hot. Now we have 32 degrees outside. Last week we had 40. You need to use your air conditioner. That is costly, and that would increase more and more.
Indeed, the energy poverty is a big issue that is mentioned by many, cold winters also in Finland and in Romania and Latvia, where I come from. Is this the dominating issue now? And how big is energy poverty in general in Romania? Can an average person easily pay for the heating?
Well, let's say that let's start by a social thing. The government recently decided to freeze the minimum wage, which is only 280 euros in Romania. It decided to freeze pensions, and the average being around 300 euros. And here we have millions of Romanians paid by the minimum wage, and also the majority of retirees are receiving less than the average pension. That is the context in which we should have a look upon possible increasing of the energy bills. So for most of the families, it will be difficult to cope with higher energy prices.
I think let's move now to Finland, because Finland, of course, as we were talking, is also quite cold. What about the energy and energy poverty and kind of energy prices there? Because another thing, of course, that Finland is not a very densely populated country. You need to drive distances, and of course, cars also cost. They cost a lot of money. Is that an issue, or you say that the social welfare level is such that it's not worrying people too much?
I would say that the social welfare and like how Finnish state is built ensures that people don't have to worry so much about keeping their houses warm, because I would say almost everyone in Finland manages to have warmth during the winter. Of course, how much the warming of the houses and electricity and everything costs is sometimes a big debate, because it is money that people need to use for their everyday life. But when I think about the Finnish government reactions to this like social fund that Commission was also proposing as a part of the Fit for 55, it was actually quite negative. So the Finnish ministers are saying that we already have initiatives in EU that we can use for like putting funds to help people to accommodate the change that we need to fight the climate crisis, and we shouldn't start building a new fund. So this kind of like had the little bit of echoes of the discussion of the recovery package and how like a tough line Finland was having there. So now this social fund idea wasn't very well welcomed in Finland.
Yes, I hear that this is the case with many so-called frugal countries. That they were not particularly keen on making more steps into trying to redistribute wealth in the European Union. Matthias, French politicians, including the Environmental Committee chair in the European Parliament, are saying that this new ETS system for houses and for cars might bring people back to streets. They have, of course, a very, clear experience with Gilets jaunes, and the French elections are coming next year, so they don't want people back on the streets. They are already, in some extent, but on a different subject right now with the COVID passes, but not on the climate. And energy prices. What's your opinion? Is there a threat of some sort of opposition from parts of the population who would be saying, yes, we're forced to live outside of the cities, we are forced to drive because we cannot afford rent in the city, and now they're punishing us for using cars when we never wanted to use them to begin with?
I mean, I know for sure that all German politicians, I think especially those on the more conservative side, have followed very closely what was going on in France over the last years with the Gilets jaunes protest movement in Germany. The AfD, the far-right opposition party, they've tried to become the party of the diesel drivers, kind of like of those who depend on the car, who wanted to buy a diesel because it's most efficient and stuff like that. So I think there was always this awareness and kind of like fear that something like that could come up in Germany as well. My impression is more that both the Christian Democrats who have fought for this idea. We have something similar that was introduced by the beginning of this year in Germany. I think they have the argument, we need something like that. We need the social fund, or we need a social mechanism to prevent exactly those kind of protests. We have to convince the citizens that, of course, it will be a challenging task ahead, but the social dimension will be taken care of. Those who don't have enough money or who have to spend a certain percentage of their income on transport and housing and heating and all the stuff, they will get help by government. So, and that's also something what the Greens have in their election campaign. It's kind of like an energy money. I think where they hope that in the end of the year you might even like get a check or a money just sent to your bank account by saying just like that's something you receive to pay for the extra cost, or something, some extra money that is there because we use more renewables. So I think the debate is a little bit different, but I can also say from the conversations I had with some German diplomats or German MEPs, I'm sure that they are aware that it will be kind of like an uphill battle or long discussions whether this second ETS will really see the light of the day. Of course, we all know that that France is taking over the presidency next year, where then of course they will be like in a driving seat to steer some of the discussions at the council positions. So I think it will be very interesting, and of course also just like to see how Ursula von der Leyen maneuvers it, because of course I heard a lot of criticism, her being German, a member of CDU, that she worked a little bit too hard for a position that her home country and the party was eager to see. So yeah, as I think many of us have heard in Brussels, the real fights and arm twisting and debates and political work is about to start and will last for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, depending on how things go, which of course is understandable. But at the same time, the climate crisis, I think, tells us that time is a very limited source. So if we spend years on fighting how we actually want to fight climate change, then we might have to set us more ambitious goals in the end, because we've wasted 3 years on bargaining. So yeah, tough position to be in for everyone involved.
Yes, indeed. And that brings us nicely towards my last set of questions, because our time is also running out. How do you see this debate proceeding? You know, Franz Timmermans, so far executive vice president, have been saying that, well, if you don't like something, bring me a better proposal, I'll have a look at it. You know, he's in very combative stance. Is that, you know, how long do you think he can hold on to this kind of combative positions? And when do you think he'll need to start to perhaps, you know, take a more gentle approach in order to reach any kind of compromise?
I think it's if I take that first, yes, I think combative is a good description, but I think it's also very accurate, and I think right for not only for smart political messaging, but for the right reasons. The Commission has stressed that in the end of June the climate law was passed, so like we have a legally binding commitment by all 27 member states, signed up by Parliament as well, that by 2030, we want to reduce CO2 emissions by 55%. So that's legally binding. I think when I look at Germany, we have a climate law that gives targets for special sectors. And if the sectors are not reached, I think within a couple of months, the respective minister has to come up with a proposal how he will make up, or how he or she will make up for that. So I think at least from the German side, I don't know about how it is in other countries, but I think there are member states where they have very ambitious targets already that they have to fulfill and that they want to fulfill to have an advantage on the global scale. And I think then, of course, the European dynamic will will play, because I think the Germans will not be willing to be very ambitious if they see that some neighboring countries or countries in other parts of Europe are kind of like dragging their feet and not doing anything at all. So I think there is this sense of we're all in this together. Of course, some help is needed. Of course, a country like Romania, Bulgaria, that are not so well off as Germany or the Netherlands or Austria are, of course, they need some help. But I think that it has to be a give and take, and it has to be a common understanding that dragging the feet is not really an option. And the earlier we start to try to find a good way forward, everyone will profit in the long run. If not ourselves, then at least hopefully our children or grandchildren.
Hedda, what's your take on the potential development of this? Will it really take 2-3 years, as Matthias was saying, or maybe there is some hope for it to be a bit shorter?
Yeah, at least 2 or 3 years, I would say. I see this is going to be a long debate, because in the end it boils to the money and how much this can cost, and like how much member states and everyone is willing to pay for these changes. But it would be also important, and we have a little bit of discussion in Finland too, that we should also bring into picture the alternatives. So if we wouldn't do anything, or if no one does anything for the climate change, what will happen and how much that will cost? So not just speaking about like how much more like gas is gonna cost in few years, but like what happens to our like food and like living conditions and everything if nothing is done. So I hope that the discussion is going to be like a bit broader than just like how this is going to make my life harder. But yeah, it's going to be a long debate, and like it's hard to say at this point how the member state positions will develop and where we will be in like a year or two.
Finally, Florin, also on a more general note, is climate change actually a big subject in Romania? Because, for instance, in Latvia, where I come from, we have this idea that we are already one of the greenest countries in Europe, and therefore we don't need to do much, you know, because others, they have to do something, we don't need to do so much. How do the people see this issue in Romania? Because that would obviously affect the stance of the government as well.
Well, the Romanian industry in the time of communism was very energy consuming, and only a small part of this industry survived to the transition towards the capitalism. So the demand of energy diminished drastically, and that led to a recomposition of the Romanian energy production. So practically now, most of the Romanian energy comes from renewable sources, like 34% from hydro energy, 15% from the wind, 7% from solar panels, etc. So we are entitled to believe that we have a green energy mix. Nevertheless, the climate change is definitely a preoccupation for the Romanians, and just see the effects of the recent floods affecting, like in Germany, some areas in Transylvania, destroying houses, destroying bridges, floods which everybody links to the global warming. Of course, when the government takes measure to tax the carbon dioxide emissions, to increase the tax on the fuel, nobody likes. Yeah. But the reactions are not so strong, I would say. No riots in the street, no strikes. So I guess the process will continue without big falls.
Thank you very much for your comments, for this debate. It was indeed very interesting to hear different perspectives from different corners of Europe. And this is all we have time for now. I'm sure we could talk about it much longer, but I hope we'll have the opportunity to do it again. So thanks for your attention, and see you next time.